We live in a time of highly personalized, curated feeds. I don't know about your feed, but lately everyone seems to have an opinion on whether or not Emma Chamberlain should have or should go to college. And as a non college attending degenerate, I have opinions. Yes, on the topic itself, but mostly whether or not this is a matter we need to concern ourselves with in the first place. A couple months back, I got a very interesting comment on one of my artists' analyses videos that said something of the sorts. This was weird and parasocial. And so naturally, like, my knee-jerk reaction is to be defensive. But it got me thinking, yeah, maybe this is parasocial. And also, it's interesting that we've come to a collective self-awareness to where we're starting to define where that line is crossed, which ultimately I think is healthy. But yeah, I mean, I can agree with that person, even though they made me feel defensive. Here I am justifying my fascination with someone or someone's work who I entirely do not know, all while sitting on a hill wondering if I should be allowed to do so at the same time. How human of me. Hi, I'm Kate. I'm an artist and I talk about things I love or are interested in. And today I wanted to kind of zoom in, if you will, on the things that we glorify, how glorification of others can be helpful, and how it can be dangerous. So on the case of Emma Chamberlain, if anyone cares, I think most of the initial crowd meant well in just saying, like, this seems like something she might be interested in, or all the topics that she talk about, maybe she can find a deeper understanding through higher education. But I do think it's important to recognize that, one, like, college is not synonymous with higher understanding of everything. And two, it's like not the ultimate arbiter of learning how to analyze and think in a critical fashion. And what I did just there is the reason why I think so many of us are so highly invested in celebrities or our idols. They serve as vehicles for our own ideas, interests, and values. The parasocial starts with who we long to be or who we don't want to be. And in many ways, that's highly impersonal and has nothing to do with the person or collective body of people that we tokenize. When we make a judgment like, oh, she should have gone to college or she should not go to college, it's almost as if we feel as though we could have behaved or performed better given a certain set of circumstances. Though I'm sure if most of us turned the spotlight onto ourselves, we would realize it's a lot more nuanced. It's all too easy to become experts when the burden of the fall is collectively distributed rather than resting on our mortal shoulders. But maybe, just maybe, we feel we're entitled to have an opinion because deep down we sense that the degrees of separation between ourselves and the esoteric star aren't as far as we outwardly project or tend to admit. It's very fascinating that many young adults aspire to more traditional career paths that tend to correlate with a high financial success. There's always like one oddball career in there, whether that's the case of wanting to be an influencer, an entrepreneur, or an artist, where there's a high degree of risk and not necessarily a guarantee of financial wealth, but the possibility of garnering a high level of status. As said by CNBC, some 57% of Gen Zers said they would like to be an influencer given the chance, according to a new report. That's a notch higher than the 41% of adults overall who opt for the emerging career path. So still overall, like 40% of people in this study, given the chance, would give a hand at like being an influencer. The explosion of TikTok makes it seem more possible no frills, direct to cam, and low editing content as well on TikTok. So it's broadened the amount of people who feel that influencing is accessible to them. There's this other study done by Axios of career goals of young people done this year. And you'll see we have business person, doctor, engineer, all things we kind of associate as like bona fide, smart career choices. And then there's artist. And then we go back to IT, tech, finance, nurse, lawyer, all very sensible things. And then there's author. So it's fascinating how so many of us have the desire to opt for something maybe a bit more status driven or separated from a more traditional career path. I also want to add that these studies focus on America. And as we know, America and like Western culture in general tends to be very individualistic. So if we were to look at the study of the world, but yeah, we're not all like this, but there's something about America. And so what does the desire for status and fame or notoriety say about ourselves? Starting in the early 1990s, Tim Kasner conducted a series of studies about people's life values and goals. He and his colleagues have consistently found that anyone whose priority is to be rich, famous, or attractive is disproportionately likely to be anxious or depressed, to have unsatisfying relationships, to smoke, drink, and watch TV a lot, and in general to report a lower level of well-being. Interestingly, what predicts this diminished quality of life isn't how rich, famous, or attractive one is, it's how much one desires these things. I think we've long been fascinated with the effect of being put on a pedestal means, or why it's so interesting to look at that pedestal. If these studies were starting in the early 1990s, I think the 90s to the 2000s, like up until the 2008 recession, were a time of excess. And it's also very notably before social media existed, before traditional celebrity has broken down into a couple of more nuanced subgroups with influencers, and now there's even a distinction between an influencer and a creator and like what that all means. From as far as I can tell, this is just kind of pointing out a correlation. So I don't know how much I'm going to glean from this quote specifically, but I'm most interested in extracting and unpacking that desire. It's no secret that we all need validation in some sense. We're a social species. We like to have our thoughts and feelings projected onto and off of other people. And I don't think that necessarily has to be unhealthy. I think it's something you need to be self-aware about. We all kind of latch on to different mythical mentors that are more of a idea of a person themselves because we're chasing a certain identity. And so, no, I don't think you can separate art from the artist or a person's work from their individual actions. I want to make a whole separate video on this. This is mainly a side note, but I think the reason why we attach to certain pieces of art, craft, or work are in a lot of ways because of the people behind them. I think I'm fairly skeptical of, virtual artists, or, we're even seeing like AI influencers come about and that sort of thing. I think a person is so much more compelling and aspirational because we can see what we perceive as ourselves onto another person versus a thing that feels much more cold and manufactured. And art and work is more impressive based on the context behind it, right? Like there is a reason why we are able to recite the lore almost and backstories of some of the people we admire most, because that information is sought out and adds a whole nother level to their potential and maybe to our potential in a way. I don't know if you've heard the expression, never meet your heroes. The original expression comes from the French writer Gustave Flaubert, and the original translation roughly equates to, don't touch your idols, a little gold always rubs off. Maybe the person you upheld in your mind cannot meet the unrealistic expectations that you've created. I almost think of it kind of like in the same way you heavily romanticize a crush or maybe a prospective partner in the honeymoon phase before the reality and logistics of coordinating your life with another person in any context sets in. Yeah, it's almost like the idea of the celebrity idol or whatever figure can be used as your own utility, which is so dehumanizing. That's why I wanted to talk about this, which brings me to the ever motivating celebrity. A lot of people are really into pop culture or have pop culture kind of stuffed down their throats, whether or not they actively seek it out. It's everywhere. I think a lot of us in public would discuss how it's shallow, and yet, if it wasn't being consumed on such a mass basis under the reigns of capitalism, I don't know if it would be popular. So it's something we participate in. A whopping 60% admitted that an idol had influenced their attitudes and personal values, including their worth ethic and views on morality. And nearly half said that their idol inspired them to pursue activities including acting, sports, or becoming a vegetarian. I've always gotten really inspired by people who I really respect, and seeing how they learned and did things, and it can be a vehicle for legitimate positive influence. The internet loves to dink on this idea of the crazed fangirl or fanboy, and we'll talk about in the ways that it can cross the line, because it most definitely can. But I think in the most basic sense of an artist, a celebrity, or just someone creating a container for community and potentially creativity, or an outlet to share similar thoughts and feelings with other people, I feel like that can be positive. But where does it cross the line? If we engage in idolization, which or glorification in any way, even in just a small way, it's just really important to be aware of that and aware that you are creating an idea of a person and that you don't know the person. But I also believe that you can know something rationally, and feel something different emotionally. But I think even if you put yourself out there as a person who's garnering attention or garnering a community based on what you create, or what you do, you still deserve boundaries and respect and an opinion like everyone else. And the one thing that I think is kind of cool about seeing people call me parasocial, and I guess other people, just this parasocial policing thing that I hadn't previously seen, is that I feel like people are starting to recognize that, hey, there are some boundaries of how we should throw actual real living people into a public forum or discourse. Each of us is a metaphor for our own species. At our best, we humans are benevolent and inspiring, but we can also be benighted and destructive. So it is with our role models, heroes, and idols. We seem to need these figureheads to give us some stability during challenging or frenetic times. When people have role models to look up to, they feel comforted, at least for a while, but all-encompassing worship of any person inevitably leads to disappointment. What a great quote. It's up to us to remember that it's okay to be inspired by someone or how you perceive someone. But at the end of the day, that lens that you're experiencing the world in comes back to what's going on in there, especially now in a world where you're getting a flood of like really pretty colorful buttons all the time, buttons, notifications. Easy to become addicted to external validation, which I don't think is ever a great thing. But yeah, I think we get by with a little bit of help from our friends, from those in our communities, remembering that we're all human. Even if someone puts them in a public space doesn't mean we have the right to invalidate their boundaries. And I think the most important thing is to take some time and like unpack your desires. Like when you see someone, whether it's on a mass scale or maybe it's just a friend, or someone in your life and you admire, try and ask yourself like what is it about that person that is really calling to me, and what steps can I take in my life so that I can cultivate some of those skills and grow. I don't know what this was. I would love to hear your thoughts on parasocial relationships and the line of where they go too far. I don't know exactly what that is. I feel like I have a very vague, I feel like it's one of those, you know, when you see it of, ooh, that's wrong. But again, I feel like this is all very new, and I feel like everyone's scale of where that is very different. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I will always say I think we can all be a little more forgiving of each other. And remember that everyone hopefully is doing their best or trying to do their best with where they're at. Yeah. All right. I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. Bye.